No
So
problem.
I got some new software, and
Now check.
actually I think we are live. And nope, yep, it says we're live, but
Okay.
nothing's happening yet. But he said so. What happened? I got some new streaming software, and now I
Okay.
use this thing called it's called Riverside,
Yeah, yeah. I
and I'm
saw
still
with
learning how to work it. Yeah, but
100%. I was, yeah, also I think it's like the third way we've done it.
yeah,
I'm saying like I think it's like the third platform, but it's all good. It's all good.
yeah, man. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, man. Thanks for coming back on, man. I always enjoy having the conversations with you, man. And so
Yeah, no,
this
good.
time,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, man. So I wanted to our last conversation towards the end we were talking about discussing morality, and towards the end we got on slavery, and so there were some
Yeah,
differences on not on I guess not on the morality of slavery, but on how slavery exists in the Bible or if it does at all. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
like and I'm of the opinion that the type of slavery that we saw in the antebellum South right here in the United States is pretty much exactly what's described in the Bible. Like it's almost like a one for one comparison.
Okay. And
So
why do you think that?
well, so in the antebellum South, so we talk about let's talk about like the elements of it, right? So there was only a certain group of people who could be enslaved, right? And that's the same way in the Bible, right? So it says like don't make slaves of your fellow Hebrews, right? But you may
Mm-hmm.
purchase your slaves from the heathen nations around you, right? And so that's kind of what was happening, right? They were getting them from heathens, getting heathens out of Africa, right? You could the slaves they were owned as property, right? So it wasn't just forced labor like what was happening in like in the first century Rome. Like you actually owned the person. So like it was chattel slavery. That that's straight out of Leviticus 25. Um, you get to when you die, you get to give your slaves over to your children as inheritance, straight out the Bible. I mean, so I mean, even like there's rules. I'm not going to say that beating your slave was allowed, but the way the text is written, it is like it's a de facto it's a de facto permission to beat your slave, right? Because and it says like if you beat your slave, as long as you don't he doesn't die before in a day or two, then you're not to be punished because he is your property. So just think about how what is the law saying? Like the law is saying like so if I do something and nothing happens to you, like if I was to punch you in the face and then nothing happens to me, that is essentially saying the law is saying I can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, what's
Yeah.
going on, Phantom? I just saw his comment and then he says, music by Brian. The Bible says nothing about protecting the wetlands. It's an inside joke. He was on the show
Okay.
about a year ago, but
Okay. Nothing about protecting
the wetlands. It's an inside joke. He
Oh,
was on a. We were talking about
okay. Okay.
government. It's an
Okay.
inside joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess so. I asked, and so my question is like, do you disagree? Like that is slavery. Like not just slavery, but shadow slavery, and it's not indentured servitude. The Bible talks about that too, in Leviticus 25 in the same chapter as it talks about slavery, and it distinguishes the two. This is when it talks about
You mean,
slavery. It's a form of chattel slavery that is separate and distinct from indentured servitude.
um, yeah, because like I mean, I do think that slavery is sure. I was going to be ready for an hour. No, no. I thought that slavery was definitely it, it, it I do believe that you're able to. owned slaves in the Old Testament, or I mean, even in the New. Uh, Excuse me. I mean, obviously, it was like a universal thing that was happening all over. If that makes sense. I mean, and I know I think the most problematic verse. There were a few things that made it obviously different. You know that you weren't allowed to return a slave to its owner if someone ran away from another nation. There was all of the, you know, like if, there were a lot of like I think
Yeah.
safeguards
So
in there.
yeah, and
If
so
I may
like,
say,
well, I was gonna
because
say
I know
so.
that you go, you
Well, it's
go.
like in the United States, there were northern states that had laws that were prohibited that. And this is actually one of the causes for the Civil War. Like if you look in the Declaration of Secessions, like this is clause in our in the American Constitution. It's still there. It's called the
Mm,
Fugitive Slave Clause that says that
yeah,
a escaped slave has to be returned. Well, there were state
yes.
laws that said otherwise, and so they just weren't doing it, right? And so that's another example of it kind of just falling in line. I guess depending on what lens you're looking at, where the American Constitution or where you're looking at state laws. But
Mm,
there
mm.
were state laws that as well that prohibited returning escaped slaves. And
Okay,
so
yeah, and
and
that would be
and
more biblical.
yeah, and so and and while that's nice, that
Yeah.
isn't that doesn't really settle the matter, right? Like it'd be better just like outlaw slavery period. Well, why have a law just say if they manage to get away, then you can't return them?
Mm,
Okay,
mm.
well that just kind of just incentivized me to prevent them from trying to escape in the first place.
Um, Look, I think out of all of the Bible verses that are dealing with slavery, while you, like
Mm-hmm.
in ancient Israel, the most problematic one is the one where it says that you can beat your. It seems like it says you can beat your slave if he doesn't die, you know, like for a day. But
Mm-hmm.
also like you know, if you harmed your slave, you know, in that same verse, I'm not gonna probably not gonna find the actual verse. I was gonna write these all out, but I do have Google here in front of me if we need it. But it also
Mm-hmm.
says, you know, if you were to harm, like you know, I think any permanent damage that you did to the slave meant that they would have to go free as well.
Yeah,
You know, like if the tooth was knocked out to the eye. Now, obviously, like in ancient Near Eastern culture, and I mean in Israel in particular, it would have meant that they didn't mean like okay. So as long as it don't hurt your eye or tooth, it means I can still chop off your finger or something. I mean, obviously that would be like read as okay. These are the restrictions, and I mean I think that the thing with regards to the beating the slave, it was just to show that the intention wasn't to kill if they do get up after 2 days. I don't know that it was a matter of allowing someone to just go and beat slaves as much as they wanted to. And I've seen some of the photos. I think we're actually doing the transatlantic slave trade. I'm teaching it this term. I think it's this term with the kids, or in the third term. We just do it with our grade sixth and seventh, just so that they're aware of what was happening. Um, and I mean, I look at some of the ways that the slaves were treated, and I'm just like, I don't know if you as much as you're like saying, oh, I'm allowed to have slaves, it's like you're not reading the whole context of everything where it says that you obviously have to treat them properly. You know that Israel was the look. I do believe this, and I know that guys like Paul Copan have made the observation. It's like the first texts in human history where slaves were people, not just property, does come from the Old Testament. You know, like we
but
have the
but it also reaffirms that they are indeed property. Like it says that.
mm,
Like because it says because he is your property. And one thing, so you had talked about like how if you damage the slave's eye or knock out his tooth, you have to let him go. So this is a reaffirmation that the slave is treated differently as a person, because a free man, if you destroy his eye, what happens to you? You
you
get
have to
your
let him
own eye
go.
destroyed, right? It's an eye for an
Mm.
eye, right? If you knock out your tooth, you get your
Okay.
own tooth knocked out. But for if you do it to a slave, you just let him go. It's treated very differently. So it,
You
it
don't
is
think that
it is
that's more?
setting up a class of purses, which is exactly what happened in
Mm,
the American slave trade. There was a hierarchy. You had your freemen, and then you had your slaves, where different
mm.
laws applied to them.
Yeah. Even though, again, I mean, I think can you name any other societies that were doing it better, or you
Yeah,
just?
I mean,
I
I
mean, is
think
it,
our
maybe
society
it's not
right
your
now
point?
does it better. Like, I mean,
Yeah, yeah. I'm talking about any other ancient societies.
um, that like banned slavery.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, I'm not
outright.
a I'm like yeah I'm not a like a expert on or even remotely like astute on ancient cultures. Like I have no
Mm,
idea. But I
yeah.
think one benefit that this society ought to have is that they're hearing straight from an all loving, all knowing, all powerful God who utters nothing but wisdom and righteousness. Yet he gives them slavery. Like you'd expect something like profound
Um,
from a moral
are you
standpoint.
assuming? Look, I just want to know. Don't misrepresent you there, Tribulate. Are you saying that the Bible introduced slavery?
No, not at all. I'm not saying the Bible introduced slavery. What I'm saying that the Bible it promotes it. And if we're talking about if the Bible comes from this holy righteous God, you would expect something different, something profound, and it's not like
Mm.
the the moral the moral precepts that we get from the Bible, especially regarding to slavery, seems to just blend in with everything else you'd expect from that time.
Um,
Almost as if they
I
weren't
think
hearing from a all loving and all knowing God at all.
you do know that, like, the only society that actually had slaves being equal to their masters would have been Israel.
They weren't so
Uh,
not according to the
no, no, no,
Bible.
but
They were not equal.
for
You could
and I
not
understand. Look,
own you could not
yeah,
own other Hebrews.
no, but even the foreigners who were enslaved
Hmm.
were equal to every is other Israelite
Okay,
for
in what regards?
for
There was
for
just a different set
for
of rules
one
that applied to them.
yeah, for one day in the week, everyone had to observe the Sabbath.
So from my
So
understanding,
no, but I'm just saying. So for one day
the
in the week,
Sabbath didn't apply to them. So like
no, it
I
did.
did some studying like into this. Like for instance, like if you had debt that you had to pay back, like on a, like on the on the seventh year, your debt would be forgiven. That wasn't the case for
Yeah,
non
yeah.
non
I'm, I'm not talking.
practicing
I'm, I'm, I'm not.
Hebrews living
I'm
among them.
not talking about the. I'm not talking about the year of Jubilee. I just mean that once a
Me
week.
neither. I'm talking about the seventh year.
Mm.
Like so, like every
Yeah.
7 year was a Sabbath as
Sorry,
well.
seventh
And
year,
I'm
and then
saying
also
debts
year of
weren't
Jubilee.
forgiven. So that would only
Yeah.
apply. That would only apply to
Yeah.
Hebrews.
Yeah. Yeah. But what I'm talking about every, well, what they would, what we'd call a Saturday today,
Hmm.
is that everyone for that one day was equal. No one did any work. No one was allowed to
Well,
do any work.
that's
You
nice.
know,
The year of Jubilee was like every 50 years.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's
So
every 50 years. But
okay,
but I'm talking
so
about every no, but I'm talking about every 7 days. Every 7 days, everyone was equal. And I know, look, I think in essence, the Bible is also the only document.
where
The whole thing about hmm?
ask him. So where in the Bible did you see that?
Exodus. I'm actually just trying to find the seventh day you shall rest. That your oxen, your donkey, you may have rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. Um, and this is not. This is also in the context of not oppressing the foreigner. Now, I just wish uh,
So I
it
know.
is
So
there.
I do know for slavery, if so for the Hebrew
Exodus
slaves
22.
that would sell themselves as indentured servants, they were
Yes.
free after they would do 6 years and they be free on the seventh.
Mm.
Right
But what I'm
now,
saying is
women
just
weren't
on the
allowed to go free, and foreigners were not allowed to go free either.
yeah, yeah. But
So
every
it
Sabbath,
was just for
no one
Hebrew
worked.
males 6 years of labor, you're free on the seventh.
Yeah. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, the Sabbath was every Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
It was every day the Sabbath was like every Saturday. No one did
Yeah.
any work. So unlike all of the other nations, there was one day when everyone inside the land of Israel was equal, like absolutely equal. No one's doing any work on that day. Everyone is resting.
I
So yeah,
okay. Let's
look,
say
I'm
let's say
not.
I'm not convinced that's the case. But let's say I grant it. Let's say I grant it. Well,
Why wouldn't you be convinced?
so from my understanding, and I can like, and I haven't looked into this in a while, but like I did a research paper back on like on this topic back in like 2014 when I was first in grad school, and from my understanding is that the rules of the Sabbath did not apply to foreigners. So
There's
the forgiving of debts, work, and all that kind of stuff that didn't apply to them.
Yes, not the forgiving of debts, not the being set
Yeah,
free
like
after 7 years,
any
and
of
not the year
those.
of Jubilee, but the
Yeah, that
Sabbath,
was my
the week,
uh-huh.
the yeah. I was actually, look, strangely enough. I mean, even before you got a hold of me, I was just reading a book on introduction to Judaism. So it wasn't like by a Christian apologist or anything, but they just said that the one thing that was unique about ancient Israel is that
Mm-hmm.
no one did work on the Sabbath. No one. So for one day, everyone was equal. The other thing that was also a bit different from
But
antebellum slavery, the other thing that was also different about antebellum slavery, and look, I'm getting that from Exodus
okay.
23, verse 12. There's also, you shall not oppress the sojourner, the heart of the, and again, one of the reasons that you were told to treat your slaves well in Israel was because you had been a slave in Egypt. Israel had been enslaved in Egypt. And it was like,
Except you
how
can
you were
beat
treated
them.
by the Egyptians?
Yeah, except you can
Sorry?
beat them because they're your property. But
Again,
let's say I'm a grant. So I would grant the
yeah,
Sabbath.
yeah,
So
yeah.
every Saturday they're treated equal. Like
Which
how does
again,
that fix anything? Like you think it's now a
because
moral institution?
I'm asking if like I mean, like, just some of the differences between the obviously in Israel and what was happening outside of Israel. And foreign slaves that ran to Israel were also not to be sent back to their slave owners. So it does seem, if you were going to be a slave, and also one of the big differences was slave owners were working with their slaves in the fields, unlike in the South, where you had the
I,
cotton, like the guy. I'm just saying, unlike the guy owning the cotton, who owned the cotton field and was then sitting there sipping tea or his martini or whatever it was. I mean, whatever picture we have here.
but here's
Um,
the difference. So some like sometimes like back in the antebellum South, sometimes he might be in the field, sometimes he may not. But the difference is when he's in the field, he's doing it because he has a choice. The slaves do not. So let's say I grant that they were in the field working with their slaves. Do you think now is a moral institution?
are we? You think? I think it's a moral
Yeah,
institution.
would you say it's a moral, like, because like this is coming
Okay.
from the
Oh, you
Bible?
know what? I have a feeling
So
if this ever comes out, it seems as if, at least according to the Bible, there is a moral way to own slaves.
I wouldn't say there is a moral way to own
Yeah, yeah,
anybody.
yeah. I understand. I understand. And I was actually
Mhm.
keen just to find out from you, like, what do you think? I know that and I agree with the argument that unlike anywhere else,
Mhm.
that all people, regardless of whether you were slave or free, there was a belief in ancient Israel that you were made in God's image. So, and one of the arguments that actually emerged, and it was from the church. I mean, it was in the third century AD, like the first person to ever. Because we got to also understand. I think we have to understand that no one was calling for the abolition of slavery from anywhere else. Not even the slaves were asking. The slaves didn't want to be slaves. If you were mistreated
Well,
and
they
everything,
were
you didn't
calling
want to
for
be a
the
slave.
abolition through their actions, like they'd run
Mm.
away.
Yeah, no. They were calling to be free. They didn't want to be enslaved, but
Yeah.
they weren't saying no one should be enslaved.
Well,
Like,
maybe, maybe not.
it,
I mean, I don't know.
no,
Like, just not
this
like
is what,
it's not like we have a
yeah,
diary of some guy who was slave to a Hebrew 6,000 years ago. Like, I'm
yeah.
maybe
But
I could definitely imagine people who were slaves back then saying, "Hey, this
yes,
is wrong,"
yeah,
especially if you want to
but
receiving it.
the only
Like for
reason you
instance,
can,
like how about this? When the Hebrews were slaves in Egypt, they wanted to be free, right?
yeah, but they weren't
Well,
calling for the
there's an
abandonment of all
example.
slavery everywhere. They weren't calling for the abandonment. I'm just saying, and
Okay.
this is hard for us to appreciate. This is very hard for us to appreciate in 21st century Western society. Is that it's such an anomaly. I mean, 300 years ago, even what, 250, 300 years ago, I mean, it was nowhere in all of human history had anyone come along, really, like, seriously come along and said, listen, slavery itself is wrong. That actually comes from, oh, I was going to pull him up over here, but there was uh, I just want to quickly
But
see it. Is it going to come up now? To call for abolishment of slavery. Like, you didn't find this idea that slavery is wrong.
well,
It's not going to.
yeah, because I mean, so that came along with the Enlightenment era, and isn't that isn't that an indictment of the Bible? Because they had the
Excuse me?
Bible. I said, isn't that an indictment of the Bible that it had been on this earth for several millennia, and not until the Enlightenment era does people start calling for the abolishment of slavery. Well, why couldn't he read the Bible and come to that conclusion?
But the first people to start calling for the abolition, like, the Enlightenment thinkers, like Kant and so forth, they were all influenced by the church's call for the abolition of slavery, which started with the Quakers, really, as a
The-
movement.
so there
I'm
were
just saying, this is a
there
bit
were
of a dichotomy
Christians,
here.
but there were
Hmm?
Christians on both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
Like
But the first people to start
especially like
calling
in
for the
Western Europe and the United States, which was almost entirely Christian. On every issue ever, you would find Christians arguing for and against it because that's all there really were.
what? But again,
Right.
this didn't
Well,
happen. Can I ask
I'm
Tribulate,
yeah.
where do you think this call for abolition of slavery was going to come,
Enlightenment era.
outside of the church, like outside of the church, like
Well,
where?
so back then the church was running everything. So when on
But
on any controversial issue, there would be the church would be on both sides. Members of the church would be on both sides of either one.
so just quickly, the
You
first
can go
person
back and
recorded.
go
I
back
found
and
him. I found him. So
we talking about William
yeah,
Wilberforce.
no,
Is that
Gregory of Nicaea.
okay?
Gregory of Nyssa. Gregory of Nyssa. He's
Looking
the
at
first
gospel.
person recorded. He was the first person in recorded history. It was in the 4th century. And it took, obviously, look, I can maybe give I guess you had to hear my ideas, eh? But my point is this: we don't hear this call for the absolute abolition. Yes, there were people that said, look, I don't want my people to be enslaved. I don't want my family. But the first people to say, hey, listen, we don't want anyone to be enslaved. It did emerge from the church. You didn't get it from China, the Muslim countries. You didn't get it from South America, North America. I'm talking about indigenous Americans. Obviously, like outside of it, it's only from the church. So I guess I'm interested to hear, since slavery was ubiquitous, uh, and I mean it's hard. Like I say, we can't understand how weird we are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How
So
weird we are.
here's like the interesting part, right? So because like you're talking about how it came from the church, it came from the West, right? Enlightenment era thinking is Western philosophy. Now there
Yeah,
was
but
Christianity in other places. There was Christianity in the Middle East. There was Christianity in Africa, especially in Northern Africa. There was Christianity in India, and abolition, like the abolition movement, didn't start there either. Like, so I think you're pulling from the West and equating it with Christianity.
Yeah,
It's
but I'm
not.
saying
It
is
comes
because
from Enlightenment thinking.
no,
That
no,
is
it
not
comes
Christian.
from no, but it came from but my point is are you I mean I'm assuming are you like I've only read read-ups on it. I haven't read the book myself, but I mean, have you heard about the man, what is Tom Holland, an historian, not the not Spider-Man.
Okay.
Um,
No.
have you heard about like Dominion? It's about how it was Christianity that shaped the Western mind.
Well, you
What he
could
set out to
argue
do.
that, but go ahead.
No, what he set out to do. Look, he's an atheist. He himself is an atheist, and he wanted to write a book to explain how we get our values from the Greeks and Romans. Like he wanted to go back to Greco-Roman, culture and outlook and philosophy and stuff, and say our values, like the Western society, is built on the values of the Greeks and Romans. But just in
It
his
is.
study of it, just in his study of it, he says actually it can't be because he started looking into how they did not consider all men equal, all people equal.
Yeah, like it
You
was
you
imperfect.
understand?
Like, so it was
No,
definitely
but
imperfect.
but I'm
But when
just
you talk about
saying he.
ideas of democracy, so the Bible also did not regard everybody as equal either, right? God had his chosen few, he had his elect, and then he kind of do whatever he want to the rest, genocide, enslavement, etc. Now, when we talk about like the ideas of democracy, that came straight from the Greeks. Now, if you take democracy to its logical conclusion, you're going to get something very close to equality. Like
But
it's the idea is that the
you
people
know where it
have a
came.
right to decide their own fate. That's
But you
that's what that's.
understand, even no, but even that idea, like the idea was the idea of the equality of all people was alien to the Greeks and Romans.
To the Bible as well.
Um, no. The Bible goes back. Genesis 1 verse 27, 26, 27. Let us make man in our own image, male and female. Let us make them. This idea that all people everywhere, again,
Unless you're an
tribulate.
Amalekite or a Philistine or a Canaanite
No,
or
no,
any other
you.
ethnic group that God
They
just
were
doesn't like.
still. No, they were still made in the image of God. They were still had intrinsic human value that was equal across all things. But obviously, there's the repercussions for which God they decide to worship and which gods they decide to reject. But this idea that all people, male and female, are equal is a
They
uniquely
are they are not treated. If you look
Judeo-Christian.
at the law that was to given to Israel, it doesn't treat it doesn't treat male and females equal, right? So like the male Hebrew, he works for 6 years, he's free on the seventh. The female is just a slave for life. There was a rule that if a man suspected his wife of cheating, he could drag her to the temple, make her drink this magical potion that would destroy her reproductive system.
If she was
And so
guilty.
if she was guilty, but there was no there was no similar rule for the man. If the man was cheating, she couldn't do that to him. Like she couldn't make him drink something and then like his balls fall off. There wasn't a similar rule. Like it was the men and women were treated vastly different. That's what you can't say that they were looked at as equal. It's just not the case.
But again, if you look at Genesis 1, 26, 27, you knew that before God they were both equal. I'm just saying this idea of equality, which only emerged from the West, which was the only civilization as influenced by Christianity more so than anyone else,
I don't
did
know about
come from
that.
which, but again, which other
But
can you name other ones that could have they were doing it better? Can you name
like
other
like
civilizations?
in northern Africa and Ethiopian, like those were very Christianized, and they became Christian far like way before Western Europe. Like those guys, like, if you
Yeah.
look at like in England and Ireland and all that kind of stuff, they were pagans. While like in northern Africa, there was Christians all around. But
Yeah.
where do you see the ideas of freedom? Not there. They come out the West. They come out. They start with the Greeks and then expand.
But again, the Greeks did not consider, like Romans considered anyone non-Roman as inferior. The Greeks even more so.
I agree. So what I'm
Essentially,
saying is the
yeah.
Greeks definitely did not have like
This
equality
idea of
down perfect. They
equality.
didn't have it
So,
perfect. Like it is nowhere near as good. But what I'm saying is that they built that foundation. It did not come from Christianity. Their ideas of
no,
democracy that started equality
no, but
predate
guys,
Christianity. They
no,
were
but okay,
heathens.
Athens was our first democracy, and everyone, like the Spartans and all of the other Greeks, mocked the Athenians for this idea of democracy. They thought it was
Yes,
crazy.
Athens, right?
And
And it was
then,
prior. Was
when,
Athens
yeah,
before or after Christianity?
yeah, but what I'm saying is, if you look at the way that their democracy is very different from what our democracy is today, only free men could vote. Slaves couldn't, women couldn't,
I agree.
non-Greeks couldn't.
Yeah,
And I'm saying, so the only
I
idea to
agree.
take heart to say that women and men could actually both vote, that if we go all the way back to the fact that no matter where you hail from, you're actually still equal. The first place to ever give that idea was Genesis 1:26-27.
It didn't because it did. So all it
So where did
says
the
like
idea come from,
so
Tribulate?
in Genesis, the idea is
And
just
when you're
that.
talking about, if I may say, when you're talking about Enlightenment thinkers,
Mm-hmm,
even those like Kant and so forth, who are now, very much not Christian or not biblically Christian, they
mm-hmm.
were heavily influenced by their culture, which was a very Christianized culture.
I'm about to tell you where it came
I'm
from.
saying like,
So
but we
enlightenment
can't see like,
thinking, but enlightenment thinking, just like any new type of thinking, right? It started in pre-Christian Greece, in Athens. And then,
but pre-Christian
and if you
Greece
look at it,
doesn't
but
have the
hold on,
idea of equality.
hold on. If you look at it in its infancy, there was a lot of problems with their democracy. Like you said, like they still had slavery. Only free men could vote. Only men can vote. I don't even think they included women. So there was a lot of problems. But what I'm saying, if you look at the Bible, you don't get anything close to that. You don't even get a democracy. You have a theocracy ran by one dude running everything. And get this. Look, when you look and after the United Kingdom of Israel only had three kings. You had Saul, David, and Solomon. And then they split, right? So Benjamin and Judah split from the 10 northern tribes. And if you look at the kings that the 10 northern tribes had, they were always evil. They would do things and God would punish them. How about separation of powers here? How about separation of church from state? Like, it's never in there. You had plenty of opportunity. The things you were doing just wasn't working, and it doesn't show up at all.
Where does the
The
idea? Where
Greeks
does the
had to
idea of
come up with this.
No, but the Greeks did not have separation of church and state. What are you talking about? The Greeks and Romans, the reason that
What
Christians were like, one of the reasons that Christians were persecuted and considered a problem was because the idea of, serving the gods and the
yeah,
welfare of the country was so intertwined that
I
when these
wasn't
Christians come along and say, we're not going to worship Caesar, we're not going to worship those gods,
I
they're
misspoke.
actually
I
blamed
wasn't
for the
trying to. I'm
fall.
sorry. I misspoke. I wasn't saying the Greeks came up with ideas of separation of church and state. Like
Where does that idea come
what I'm
from?
talking about, like it's like you have democratic governments versus total like theocrats, like we see in the Bible. There was all this
Where does the
opportunity
idea
for
of
improvement, and it never
where
shows
does
up.
this where does this idea of church and state come from? Do you have any idea in human history where it first came from?
So this idea of separation of church and state started in the United States, from my understanding.
No, the first idea was Jesus. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar, unto God what is God's. It's like the first person in history now saying that there seems to be
But
there's
if you
different
look at
spheres.
Romans 13, it talks about how God establishes all government.
Yes,
So it's
I'm
his. He gets to do
saying
what he
that you
wants.
can.
And then on top of that, but if you look the way government ran, and according to God, that the law that God gave Moses in the Hebrews throughout the Old Testament, there was no separation of church and state. Are you saying that Jesus was correcting the law? Was he correcting God? Was he
I'm saying
making
that he was fulfilling
improvements?
the law. I'm saying that he was fulfilling the law. He says, I did not come to abolish the law and the prophets, but to fulfill them.
But according to you, it
So
will be a contradiction. So if God gives
wait, no,
them
no,
a
no.
government where
How
the
do
church
you
and state are the same thing, and then Jesus
no,
separates them,
can
that's not a
no can
fulfillment.
No, but can I ask? Can I ask? Do you guys also have learners, driver's licenses, and then you get your full license?
Yeah, we get learner's
Uh,
permit and the driver's license.
yeah. We have a similar thing. Is it a contradiction to say to someone that, listen, when you have a learner's license, there are these restrictions. You can't drive by yourself. You need to have a licensed driver with you, and all of that. But the laws of the road are still the same.
Yeah, no,
But
there's no contradiction.
exactly, and I always thought of, I've really thought of, the Old Testament is like driver's license. I mean, learner's license stuff, where you have these restrictions and you have these, curtailment of freedoms and all of these things. Jesus fulfills all of that. He drives on. Look, it's not a perfect analogy, but he drives on the road. He takes
No,
the
it's very
test on our
problematic.
behalf. That he takes the driver's test on our behalf. Now that he's fulfilled it, we no longer are bound by those restrictions anymore. So I'm just saying, the first person in all of history, it seems to me, and I do stand open to correction, but having looked into this, the first person to say maybe there is as much as God is still in control, and we don't, in Romans, I mean, there Paul is literally talking about non-Christian governments. And I do feel that some Christians, I don't know, like
Okay.
some Christians who have this whole idea that, until, look, I think we can maybe use this as an example. Like some of the Christians who, like, if like, when I don't know what they're saying. Like, when Barack Obama was in, or Joe Biden was in power, like they almost make it sound as if God wasn't in control. And now that
No,
Trump is in,
but
now God is in control. I mean, look, this is a different discussion. But I'm
so
just saying,
but
it's like your theology has to
I want to let
encompass,
me interject here.
communist
So
China,
because
all of these things.
so here's the problematic when it says render unto Caesar what Caesar's unto God was God's.
Yeah,
First of all, Jesus never explained what belonged to Caesar and what belongs to God. He is not establishing a separation of church and state. He's just
but he's
saying
giving us the
there's just
idea.
some difference. What that difference is, no idea. However, if we go to Romans 13, it says, let every person be subject to the governing authority, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. So that means governments that separate the church from the state and governments that do not separate the church from the state are both instituted by God, which means God really has no preference here.
I don't know,
So
because
again,
that
you
doesn't.
you can't you
No,
can't look at the Bible
what
and get the separation of church and state here. That
I
is
just see
a
it there.
the separation of church and state is the result of a failure in Christianity. Because you had Christian in Europe, you had Christian governments all throughout the continent running their country, and they were failing. They were killing their people, persecuting them, beheading them, doing all kinds of foolishness. And people had to realize that it's a bad idea to let a bunch of religious maniacs rule their society. It is separation of church and state is a failure of Christianity. That's why if it worked, people would be doing it. We'd be doing it. We'd still be doing it. We had to fight a war over it.
You guys had to fight a war over church and state.
Yeah, so in England there was no separation of church and state,
No, I know.
and in the United States
I actually read it
that is
was
one of the reasons. That's why we had
they
like the First Amendment is in the First Amendment the Establishment
yeah.
Clause. That is one of many of reasons that was cited.
I do know. I read this one book just about the medieval. It was just the medieval time, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a big. They didn't know exactly what exactly and how do we apply this. But I'm still saying, let's look out through history. Where does this idea that there's something for Caesar and something for God as something separate, even though everything falls under the ambit of God's, obviously sovereignty?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can find, like, you don't find it anywhere else. Again, there's
Yeah,
there's there's none of that. And like,
you find it in societies that were influenced by the Enlightenment era, which started in pre-Christian Greece, and then eventually moved to other places, and ideas got better.
Tribulate. Well, again, I'm going to ask about that now. But Tribulate,
Okay.
you don't find the idea of separation of church and state anywhere in the Greek and Romans.
Right.
Like, it's
You don't
not.
find a separation of powers in Athens either. Like I said, those were ideas that later had to evolve. But what I'm saying is, but the like democracy, the idea of self governance, right? This is where equality comes from. This is where the separation of powers come from. This is where checks and balances come from. Where the separation of church and state comes from. Like it's those ideas had to evolve. But what I'm saying is like the seed, the seed that began it all. It was not Christianity. That came
Well,
from
it
the
wasn't
Greeks.
Greek and Rome either. You're going to have to look
Where did
elsewhere.
it definitely did not come from the Bible. We're talking about pre-Christian Greece, where they came up with this idea of, hey, maybe we can rule ourselves. And then with self-governance, now everybody instead of one guy just doing whatever he wants, we get to discuss, we get to exchange ideas. Since both of us, since we get to rule ourselves, we get to decide which one's better, and then we get to argue, right? And then the best ideas rise to the top. Bad ideas, we try them, they fail, we try something else. Like you see how it just once you bring in a idea that everybody gets to decide, or a bunch of people, maybe a certain group of privileged people get to decide their own fate, it starts to produce a bunch of other good ideas. And that is what spread. And this was not Christianity. It is completely ahistorical. It is revisionist history to try to say that Christianity began that. It did not.
But it's also like, if I may say, I don't know if you, I don't think you can appreciate just how much church and God and reverence of the deities was still wrapped up in everything than the politics of Greek and Rome.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the equality of all humans, not from the Greeks and Romans.
Not from the
The
Bible.
idea of
No.
a
Lean,
monogamous.
lean, lean, lean. Hold on.
But I'm saying the idea of
I'm not saying the equality of humans. The equality of humans happened in Athens. What I'm saying is the roots of those ideas came from democracy, which again led us to other ideas. So when you have one guy that just dictates everything in society, you have ideas that are suppressed. There other people have good ideas, but you don't get to hear them. Once you bring in the idea that we get to rule ourselves, and instead of one guy just making a decision for all of us, we have to discuss. Now all of a sudden, all these other ideas start coming in. Like, hey, what if we start letting other people vote? What if we get rid of slavery? Hey, how about this? Maybe we should have an independent judiciary. Maybe we should have an independent central bank. Right? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, that's how these ideas come. You wouldn't get that from a Bible when you have one king who's just following one religion doing everything. It never happened. And we had opportunity after opportunity in the Bible. Like I said, when Benjamin and Judah split from those 10 northern tribes, all of Israel's kings were evil. They would the king from Israel would bring in false gods and make everybody worship them. And then the whole country would get punished.
Yeah, 722
If
BC.
you just limit the king's authority, you could fix that. If you separate the church from the state, you could fix that. The Bible never came up with that idea. What like it took
If
other people.
it took
Why couldn't
2,000
God
years,
figure that
yeah,
out?
well, 3,000 years from that, for the development. Hey, there's this one guy that has suggested, and I mean, I remember reading this when I was a kid, that he did suggest that it was only after, it took like 1,500 years. We're just living in such a weird time, Tribulate. You don't understand. This idea of separation of church and state is like it's like, if
Like I
you,
said,
okay, it's dating
idea of
from the
church and
Enlightenment.
state is a failure in Christianity. If Christianity didn't do such a trash job running Europe, you would have never had it.
Yeah,
It's
but again, I mean,
because it failed. That is why. And
yeah,
people all over realized that, so they were like, we got to separate this. That is why.
it did show that the people were not behaving as Christians when you looked at that.
But
But it
it
took
isn't
time.
so.
But I'm saying it didn't arise anywhere else,
Yeah, so it didn't arise anywhere else, but that's not because of Christianity.
So
So
you don't think
I don't
Christianity was a
understand.
factor in?
Go ahead.
I'm saying, so you don't think Christianity was a factor in our ideas about how we should treat each other and all of those things?
So so Christianity being such a prolific religion, especially in the West, of course it was a factor in pretty much in everything that came out of Europe. Would Christianity would be a factor there? But what I'm saying is it
Yeah,
doesn't make
good.
sense
And
to
hey,
credit
in all fairness, good and bad.
good and bad, sure. But and what I'm saying is it doesn't make sense to credit those ideas. It doesn't make sense to credit the ideas of Western thought to credit the Bible for that, especially when we look in the Bible and we really don't even see it. We see contradictions in it. We see like you're talking about equality. The Bible kind of contradicts that. It doesn't treat men and women as equal. There's different laws. That's an apartheid state when you have different laws for different groups of people. You had different law for Hebrews than you had for foreigners. That's exactly kind of like what we see in Israel today. That is a modern day apartheid state where there's a different rules for Jews than for Palestinians. Like that comes straight from the Bible. You it would take. That's why I don't see how you unless you can point to specific verses, specific passages where that support the ideas of equality, of separation of powers, any of that kind of stuff. Like to me, it's just nonsense.
But strange enough, I have given you particular verses. Genesis 1, 26, 27. All men are created equal and all men are in the image of God, which is
So
absolutely unique to like the Judeo-Christian thing. You don't find that in Rome, Greek. You don't find that with the Aztecs, the Chinese. You don't find that in Africa. I'm just saying it's a
you
uniquely
said
Christian idea.
you said
And then
Genesis.
the
Where does
idea
it
of
say all men are created equal?
Genesis 1, verses 26 and 27. Let us make man in our own image. And therefore, I'm just saying we're all made in God's image. And then also, I mean, Romans
Okay, but
3:23, all have
so
sinned.
okay, it says here.
All
So it's a let us make man in our own image. That doesn't imply equality, and we
but
see that's definitely not the
look,
case in the law
male,
that God gave him.
male and female, he created them. I'm saying we're both equally in God's image. We are as much image bearers of God, which again was unique. I mean, all the other ancient Near Eastern religions, if you look around, it was all a matter
Okay,
of like maybe the king was made in God's image, but the people weren't.
you so
Maybe the
you
pharaoh was in God's image, but the people weren't.
well you
So the
can
only
make
place to say that both the ruler and the ruled are as equal, both the slave and the enslaved are as both equally image bearers, is a uniquely Christian idea. I've given you
maybe
the
in
verse
some
where Jesus.
but no, but hope that's not what it says. So maybe in some transcendent space, like in heaven, and maybe you're
No, no,
treated
no.
equal. Okay,
Do,
but
do,
like
do you
on
notice
earth, the law, the
where?
way the
No, but
way that the law treats people, it is not equal.
where? But now this is pre-law. This is before the law came in. Where are Adam and Eve? Are they in this heavenly sphere somewhere in God's image? No, they're here
They're in the garden.
on this earth.
Yeah,
They're on this earth, and a
and
physical
they get
earth
and they
where they
get
are
different
both image bearers.
and they don't even the same rules don't even apply to them. Like so, they both eat the fruit. However, Eve has to be ruled by her husband.
Look, we are.
Well,
Let's come back
what's
to
up
this.
with
But you're
that?
saying no. But you were saying where are the particular verses? And I gave you Genesis 1, 26, 27. Equally image bearers. That is crazy. Then I gave you the verse. Jesus says, "Render to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's." I gave you the verse. Like I mean, those are the ideas. And then again about
Okay,
equality.
but what I'm
Romans
saying is like
3:23.
it doesn't seem like it's really promoting equality. Like even the punishments that are given to Adam and Eve, they're not even the same.
But why? Because of them being intrinsically different value, or because of what they did? Who was
Um,
first to sin according to the story?
well,
Who was first to,
so
you know what I
Eve
mean?
was deceived. I'm not sure if that was a sin.
But I'm
Adam knew
saying,
what he was doing.
and he was right there with her, which is why God, like I mean, he was standing there the whole thing. I mean, that's a whole other thing. But The point is that they both got punished and they were both sent. It's not as if Eve was sent out of the garden and then Adam got, off scot free. They were both
But what
held
I'm saying is
accountable
that
for
their
what they did.
punishments weren't even equal. Like their
But
punishments
but
like set up set up a sexist society by saying that the wife she's going to cling to her husband.
but understand that's part of the repercussions of her actions. It's not that God was like, oh well, I'm going to make someone inferior to the other person. It was like,
But
no. If you look at that, very equal. Genesis 1:26-27.
okay, but why were the punishments different? Right,
Because
because
who
because
who
it looks like, it
said?
sounds like you're putting the wagon before the horse here, because like, so what we're talking about is, as you're saying, so two people sin against God, and then you're saying because they both sin,
Okay, wait.
one is
Tribulate,
subservient to the other.
let's take
why? That's already
let's take a step
inequality
back.
right there. Why not just get the same
Let,
punishment?
let's take the step back. Before they sinned, before they ate of the fruit, were they unequal?
Um, I don't know. I mean, they were both made in God's image. What says man was
Yeah.
made in God's image?
And it
I don't
says
know if
they're
it says
male and female. In Genesis 1:26-27. Therefore, God made man in his own image. Male and female, he made them in his own image. Which again is very, again, you look at like ancient Near Eastern, you look at Greek and Roman society, women were not considered equal. There was no verse or
yeah. That
authoritative
thanks to God
scripture.
for that.
Hmm?
Like, thanks to God for that. Then he gives them periods. Like,
All
what's up
as a
with that?
result of who ate of the fruit first and then handed the fruit to the other. It was the woman doing that.
I don't see how you're resolving this. Like, I don't see how it changes anything.
I've got, I've got two kids. I've got two
Mm-hmm.
kids. I love them both, like equally. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They're both as much my children as the other. They're equal. They're equal. It turns out that one of them threw a ball through a window. You know what I mean? Um, and the other one didn't. That one's gonna get punished in a certain way that the other one isn't. Even, you know what I mean? Like if they've like you gauge depending on what has actually happened here. I'm gonna gauge who has done what in order to decide whose phone gets taken away for 2 weeks and whose phone gets taken away for 1 week. I'm just saying that doesn't
Right,
negate
but
the intrinsic. It doesn't negate the intrinsic uh, the intrinsic bearing of my image, as it were, the equality of the love that I have for them.
okay, okay, but you would give them the same punishment for doing the same overt act, right?
Yeah, but again, if
Right.
the one
So
person is
so
leading the
Adam
other
and
one
Eve
in,
both bite of fruit. Why are they getting different punishments if they're treated equal?
because Eve was the one that was tempted by the devil, and I'm just saying she was the one that first ate of the fruit. It's like she was the instigator of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Adam is responsible because he was there but didn't stop her, but he wasn't the one that was first reaching out and eating the fruit. I'm just saying, Tribula, I can see that it doesn't negate now that they're both made equal. You know, may I
But
say
it's
so?
not. So can I read? Can I? So this is, I was looking for this passage, and it says, to the woman, he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Why is that the punishment? So let's say you and I,
Okay,
let's
can
say you and I decide to rob a bank, right? And then
yeah?
we get punished by the state, and the state says, Liam, you are now triple A slave, but
Where
both
does
of
he
you go
say?
to jail.
Where
Like,
where, where does it say
why?
that the woman is a slave?
What would be the explanation? Say it again.
Where does it say that she's his slave?
It doesn't say this. This is an analogy. Like, it doesn't say that they robbed the bank either. I'm just saying, like, because what I'm saying is in verse 16, in Genesis 5, Genesis 3:16, it says that he will rule over you. That is how Eve is punished. What I'm saying is right there, there was already a hierarchy established because they both committed the same overt act. Yet the punishment is that one has to submit to the other.
And
Why
actually, that's
why
not
are there
exactly how it
different
works. You
are
know,
there different punishments for the same
I,
crime?
but I'm just saying, okay, we rob a bank, but I'm the driver and you go in. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, dude. Is that sorry, you haven't. I don't think you know me well enough. I want to make a joke about the fact that it's the black guy going in and it's the white guy driving the car or something. But I don't know if. Sorry. Can I? Hey, I don't know if I've told you this joke. What do you call a Mexican truck driver?
No idea.
A truck driver, you racist. Yeah, I've always thought that's great. No, but okay, back to this. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I could. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just.
All right.
You know,
All
it's
right.
great. Hey, I mean, it's great. It's so it's like such. It's great. It's great. That
Okay.
one is great. Um, but I'm just saying, we both robbed the bank, yes, but who was the one that planned it? That planned the heist? There might be a difference in severity of punishment. Now, why did
So
God do it that way? I'm going to kind of look. Obviously, I'm going to kind of trust the guy that made, well, the person that made everything and has all wisdom about why that is an appropriate punishment. I don't see it as inappropriate, and I don't know, like, dude, I can
but isn't right there? So with God's
yeah,
punishment,
could
right
could
now,
could I
I'm not
could I
blaming God here, but I'm saying, but doesn't God's punishment right there establish inequality? Right there,
if I
because
may
it
say,
says here we're gonna kick you out the because God could have just kicked them out the garden now, right? And said we're gonna make and hey, stuff is gonna be rough. Food's gonna be
yeah,
hard to grow. Instead, he's like, hey Eve, Adam's gonna rule over you. No, well, men are gonna rule over you. Like he
look, I
has that.
can
What was
this
the
dude,
right there? He's
I'm I'm
establishing inequality.
I'm going right back to dude, I heard this like I heard an explanation of this from John MacArthur, and I mean this might be when I was like about 10 or something. So if I do get some of the details wrong, please forgive me. Apparently, the only other place in Hebrew where that her desire for you, I mean, like her desire will be for the husband and so forth. It was just to say, you know, that there's nothing wrong with a woman sexually desiring her husband. That can't be what God is talking about here.
Right.
Um,
It
you,
says,
you, you,
but the desire isn't even an issue that I have.
yeah.
Right? Like, cause like I
Um,
desire my wife desire me. The issue that I
yes,
have, it
yes,
says,
and
he shall rule over you. What's up with that? That right there,
I'm saying,
we're
and
establishing hierarchy.
to be late. Like, what I'm trying to say is, if we then read, I think it's in Genesis 4, and you know, with the, you know, Cain and Abel. Let me see if I
Mm-hmm.
can find it here. Forgive me if I don't exactly. Genesis 4, after Cain has now killed Abel. Well, before Cain kills Abel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the language is more in this. Um, uh, so Genesis 4.
Mm-hmm.
Where you know, the offerings are not, I mean, and we only learn in Hebrews. I mean, this is all other discussion, but we only learn in Hebrews that the reason that Cain's sacrifice was rejected is because is because is because he didn't do it in faith. But I mean, that's a whole other thing. So yeah, I think Genesis 4 verse 7, it says God is talking to Cain and he says, if you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. So the whole thing was, what it seems, if the punishment is this, is that before the fall, Eve didn't desire to rule over her husband because they kind of naturally were, you know, like a couple that with, and I mean, obviously there's kind of a, him being created first, it might have been like he was the one that taught her and I don't know how well, what good a job he did. But the whole thing about desire and ruling is the way that sin was trying to rule over Cain, and he mustn't submit to it. Is that now the wife will actually want to usurp and step out of her role as
What's her
a helper? And by
role?
the
Like,
way,
what's her role?
it,
That sounds to be like
yeah,
what
yeah,
kind
I
of
know,
principles and hierarchy
I know.
right there? Well, what
I
does
know,
he mean
but
by step out of a role?
because I'm just saying she wants to now rule over him and she wants to assert authority over him, which would, as opposed to naturally kind of,
You
coexisting with him,
you can
she now
fix
wants to
that.
impose over him.
So you can fix that
I'm
by
just
just
saying.
not saying anything at all, like just completely just kicking them out the garden. Because like this right here, right at the beginning of the book, right? We're talking about Genesis 3. So like if you have like a Bible of like an average size font, we talking about like the second page here, right? The second or third page. And right there it says that he will rule over you. And then we see that throughout the rest of the Bible, the way women are treated, and even to the New Testament, Paul is telling women to shut up, right? I permit not a woman to teach nor usurp authority over the man, right? Like you right there, like that's why. And so Phantom had asked, how did we get from slavery to equality sexes? Well, I guess the way we got there is because
Mm.
we were talking about like ideas of equality that would have ended slavery, that would have also ended like misogyny, or any type of like hierarchy based on like some sort of class, right? And the question is that found in the Bible? I don't think
And
it is.
again,
I think
the great,
all of the ideas that we see in a lot of the societies that people move out of, they immigrate out from, and eventually go to the West. Those ideas are throughout the Bible. When we're talking about the way women are treated, slavery, government, like autocratic governments, all that kind of stuff, is all in there.
what happened in Genesis 3 to
So
cause all of this? It would have been the sin.
they,
It wasn't the
they
original one. And
yes,
then he's obviously
but
working
you
back.
can't blame the
And then
sin.
obviously, and I'm saying, and then he's obviously working back to,
But
restoring the equality that we see in Revelation. So it can all be part of it. And I mean, I've given you the verses. The leveling verse is we're all in the image of God, which is alien to Greek, Roman,
but what
Aztec,
what is
all
it?
of that stuff.
What is it about the woman that the proper punishment would be that she gets ruled over?
Again, in
I
1 Timothy,
understand kicking them out the garden.
and this is also where Paul, I think, explains that, well, I know that most people don't believe that Paul wrote them, but I'm obviously a shorthand, and I see no reason to think he didn't write the pastoral epistles. But when he's talking about, was it like the one Timothy, whatever, about the role of women in church and everything, he goes back to because of what happened in the garden, because Eve sinned first. So I'm just saying, like, if God is all knowing, I think I can maybe trust his judgment on why the punishment was meted out that way. It also makes
Well,
makes sense to me,
but
as I
that
could
doesn't
say. And
really
then
address
again,
the question here, because like
mm,
you can say you can trust God's judgment and His
yeah, based on what he
misogyny.
did for me.
But so whether or not you trust God's judgment is independent of whether Western thought came from the Bible, of ideas of equality came from the Bible. They did not. Like, sure, you
But you
can
don't
trust
get,
God. God,
yeah,
you can argue that God made the right decision by establishing
yeah,
misogyny on like the third page of the Bible. You can say that. What you
because
cannot
but now
say is that Western
just
philosophy came from it.
just to confirm something.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, Tribulate. You
Yeah.
said something well there. Now my brain is gone. My brain is gone. Hey, in my defense, I thought we were only going to like start now. So, but no, but no. What I was going to just say is all of this. Okay, if a judge sends someone to prison because they've murdered someone, is it the judge's fault that they're in prison?
No.
And I think that all of our problems stem from the fact that we have sinned against God. I'm just saying, like
But
that, like all of it.
it would be, but you would have a very problematic law if when people who when men and women both break the law and the judge says the female inmates will be ruled by the male inmates. I would have huge issue with that. Like, why?
However, yeah,
Just
yeah, no,
send
no.
them to prison. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah,
because
no,
you have
I
now,
hear you,
if you just send them to prison, like we're establishing equality. Everybody goes
but
to prison for doing a certain act. When you have exceptions or different rules or different punishments based on who you are, that's how you get
but it what
inequality. That's
but
that's how you
Tribulate,
get apartheid.
read Genesis 3. It's not based on who they are, it's based on what they did.
But no. So you said so
Eve,
if Adam was the woman,
if Adam,
you
I'm just saying,
saying
had Adam,
then Eve would have been ruling over him.
I would say if Adam was the first to sin and had been misled by Satan, I think it would be probable that then that punishment that he was given, I mean, that Eve was given, could have been put onto Adam. I'm just saying, it's
Okay,
just read
so
the text. It's not
it would still be
God,
problematic because it shouldn't matter who commits the crime first. Like it doesn't matter. Like it shouldn't matter if you rob a bank before I rob the bank. We should get the punishment because robbing a bank, there's a certain statute against robbing a bank, and we just get that crime. It shouldn't be like, hey, William robbed it at 9 p.m., but Triple A he robbed it at 5 p.m. So we're
but I mean,
actually going to
look,
give him a lighter
even
punishment. That makes no
and
sense.
again, look, as much as I know about law and stuff, I mean, and everything, but there are sometimes mitigating circumstances where it says, like, if I can prove that Bob was, really cajoled into this by Sam, therefore Sam does face a harsher punishment than Bob. And I'm not saying, like, I'm just saying we can think of circumstances where the punishment is, even though they were both involved in the crime, the person that took the lead is the one that gets the harsher punishment.
Well, if you look at the
I'm,
text,
I'm, I'm, I'm,
Eve
I'm
was
just saying, I'm not
correct.
saying this is
Adam
gonna,
knew what he was doing.
I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say that this is gonna necessarily satisfy you, but I am
Mm-hmm.
saying we can think of scenarios where it would make sense that the punishments, because they both get sent out of the garden, but the
Right.
other things, I mean, now it's Adam that has to till the ground by the sweat of his brow,
So
blah blah blah. You can't just.
so you said so Eve kind of she gave it never would have happened if Eve didn't start it.
And then look, here's the other
So
interesting thing
but
is,
but hold on before you go. Like all you're doing is justifying why inequality begins in Genesis 3. Like
but they still
you're not
both.
you're so we're still not getting anywhere close to ideas of equality coming from the Bible. You're just defending of why inequality
Hey,
comes from the
look,
Bible.
if I may say, what I'm telling you now is agreed by Tom Holland, an atheist historian who has actually looked at the influence of the Christianity that has formed the world that we live in, because it was only from, the Christian West, influenced by Christianity, that these ideas emerged eventually.
The democracy came from pre-Christian Greece,
But
and
not the
it's
democracy that we, not
no
democracy as we have now.
yeah, it is not the way that we have it now. Also,
And
Christianity,
I and I
the way it
would
was
say,
practiced then, isn't
had
practiced the way now.
had
What I'm saying,
and look,
Liam, the
here's,
ideas evolve. You keep focused
yeah,
on because you're talking about
but
how when the
here's
Greeks didn't have a constitutional republic right at the beginning. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is when you have democracy and now you have a public square where people can discuss ideas about how we move forward, now you have a society, and it's my little girl.
no, it's all good.
Now you have a society where I, ideas can now be introduced. You don't get that. Like you don't get that from the scriptures. Can you shut the door?
It's all good, man.
Yeah.
Hey, let her sit on your lap. It's fine if she wants to do that. It's all
Yeah.
good. How old are your kids?
She's 5.
Is it
Yeah.
do you guys have the one kid, or
Yeah,
do you
we
have
just
more
got
than
one
one
kid,
kid?
man.
No, awesome.
Yeah.
Mine are. I can't believe it. Mine are 10 and 13 now. I think when we first did this, my oldest was 9, so it's like
Oh
four
yeah.
years ago now. I think
Oh
it's about
wow.
4. I don't know. You probably have a better. I can't even remember. Everything is lost. Um, yeah, enjoy the age, man.
Yeah, man.
Enjoy
Well,
it.
like, so she's coming in here to telling me that I need to get off the podcast and put her to bed.
Yeah. No, I understand. I see we're just going over an hour. Okay, well, look, I'm,
Yeah.
I'm just going to say this. I believe, had Christianity not emerged, had Jesus not come, had Had Jesus, I mean, give her a kiss when you're saying, just give me a moment, man.
Okay.
It's
Okay. All
fine.
right. I'll be in a second. Go. Okay.
I'm going to posit this, an untestable hypothesis. And again, maybe hey, if I'm looking, I only buy my books secondhand. I can't afford new books and all of that stuff. If I ever see Dominion, I'll read the whole thing. I have read an atheist review of it where he agrees. He says we have to understand that most of what we take for granted does have its roots in Christian thought, without us realizing it. Had Christianity not arisen, I believe that we would not have had a place where all people were considered equal. Certainly not from the Greeks and Romans. And as much as I've given you the one verse that has really informed it, that's actually also what led to the idea of them saying, if we're all made in God's image, we can no more own slaves and, enslave God himself, whereas I think on a secular worldview and if you're looking at the pagan worldviews and stuff, they wouldn't have arrived at that place.
Yeah.
Dude, I can see you got to get going. Maybe we can pick it up next time because what I didn't get around to asking is like on atheism. And atheism is not a moral philosophy, but if it's a meaningless, if ultimately there's no meaning beyond what we create for ourselves, you understand? It's like, why is atheism? I mean, why would slavery be wrong? Why would
We can
democracy
talk.
and
Let
misogynism? But
our
I'm
next
saying maybe we can do that.
discussion.
Yeah,
Our
we
next
can maybe do that
discussion, we
with
can
another
talk about that.
discussion.
Yeah.
Okay,
Next discussion, we'll talk
dude.
about that.
Thanks for reaching out. I almost wanted to say Happy New Year because we only spoke in freaking March.
Yeah.
But I think after like the 15th of January, it's like awkward and everything.
Yeah.
Hey man, look, we'll pick it up again. I'll let you know when I'm on leave again, which is in about 2-4 months time, and then we can maybe do this again.
All right.
I'm gonna
Most
get some
definitely.
shut eye. Okay. And hey, look, have a happy Easter, man. I know you. Do you guys still celebrate it as a cultural thing, or do?
Well,
Because I think
I
you
on
mentioned your
on
wife still goes
Easter,
to church, or
she does. On Easter, I usually go. So
okay. No, well, I'm just
they
saying, I
get
hope it's
one
a.
visit out of me per year.
Hey, it's if you're gonna make it once a year, Easter's a year to do it.
Yeah.
Dude, blessings. I hope it's a good one. Enjoy the weekend. Okay.
All right, bro. Be good, my man.
Cheers,
Hey,
cheers.
thanks for tuning in,
Cheers, cheers.
guys. I'll catch y'all later.
I don't know how to. I think you're gonna have to kick me out of live stream. I don't know how to